More optimism building around that China trade deal. I mean, if they're offering to buy, what, $1 trillion worth of U.S. goods to close the deficit, does that make the deal with Trump more likely?
I think this is a trial balloon. I think that's the right way to think about it. But these are the kind of things that you can get done in a month's time span. They're not going to get a deal with China on deep changes in its protection of intellectual property and some of the other grievances that the Trump administration has. But China can easily agree to buy more, and they've put that on the table. The U.S. can agree to cut back, or at least not continue to raise tariffs. They put that on the table. So we're now talking about the kinds of things that can get done in a month, and that should raise optimism about a near-term deal.
Where does that leave longer-term structural issues, Doug? Do you have an agreement to hammer them out over the next year or two?
I have always been pessimistic about the capacity of the U.S. to get that done unilaterally. I think that's something where you do need a multilateral effort. That was, as you know, the idea behind the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Some other multilateral effort, I think, is what is going to be necessary over a sustained period to get those structural issues changed. So I don't think that'll happen between now and March.
So, Gene, clearly if the president is able to make a deal and win some very large concessions, especially with $1 trillion in front of it from the Chinese, political win, what about it? What about an economic win? What would be the implication of that?
Well, I wouldn't go so quickly to whether that's a political win or not, both on the left and the right. I mean, from the very start of this, even within President Trump's own team, there have been concerns that he got so focused on the bilateral trade number, which has gotten worse in his first 2 years and is probably over $400 billion in the good side, that he would trade off the more difficult issues on structural reforms, on intellectual property, on forced technology transfers, to get China to essentially just shift around their bind so that he could point to, look at this big purchase we have. So I think that type of deal, if that's where he goes, will actually get some opposition, both in his own party, even on his own team. And I think you'll have quite a number of trade experts and Democrats asking whether he essentially took the easy way out as opposed to really continuing to press for the type of structural reforms that are needed, though I agree with Doug that from the start this would have been better with him organizing the world to isolate China as opposed to making, trade enemies out of trade friends like Canada.
You really think that Congress would push back on a deal that would involve China buying more than $1 trillion of U.S. imports, helping American business?
You've just put forward a single soundbite over 10 years. We don't know whether this is incremental, how much more. I don't know. We'd have to see the details. What I'm pointing to, though, is not just a Democrat-Republican issue. Within his own administration, this has been very much the fight. And in fact, Lighthizer and others have often pushed to not have a deal that was just seen as a big buying spree, but and therefore took the pressure off the structural reforms that people tend to care about or think are most important.
Doug?
So I hear that point, Gene, but I guess I'd politely disagree. I think from a global perspective, the sight of the two largest economies on the globe engaged in a trade war has really taken an economic toll. And it will be a win for everybody to take the pressure down a little bit. So I think no one would oppose such a deal. I don't think anyone would pretend it's the end of our troubles with China, but it would be a win for the U.S., a win for China, and a win for global growth, and we need one right now.
Yeah, I think that there is an enormous amount of volatility and chaos created by many of the president's actions. I do agree that things that can bring us into, if this was a sign that we were going into, more focus on having a little more security and certainty in the global economy, that would be positive. But when you see this behavior at the same time going on the shutdown by the president, it hardly gives you confidence that we've turned a corner on that type of, I think, more chaotic economic behavior.